Matt. Welcome to the podcast.
Thanks, Lisa. Thanks for having me on.
It's really great to have you here. I am super excited to let our listeners have a chance to get to know you, to hear about what you do. And I feel like that's a good place for us to just jump in and start. So, first of all, your bio is so intriguing about the fact that you were a research scientist working in drug development, and then had your own miraculous healing and ended up actually doing what you do now, which is quantum healing. So I'm excited to hear about that. Could we start there and then maybe share a bit of how did you get to quantum healing and what even is quantum healing?
So yeah, it was a bit of a stretch, and it wasn't like I woke up one day and I'm like, hey, I should do this. um, it was basically I don't know. I was having like all my own problems with even with everything I knew medically and um, everything I knew about like Western medicine. Working in the drug development side, the way I kind of looked at the human body as like, oh, this is broken. What do we need to fix? and but obviously that wasn't working because right before I had my own first like quantum healing session, I was on like 14 medications. I was having grand mal seizures every week. Just really kind of like struggling with parts of life, and that's when I kind of discovered this whole other field. I just started like kind of questioning everything. Other parts of my life weren't working out, and I just kind of threw in the towel and just kind of started at the scratch, like trying to figure out what I was doing wrong. And I know I was supposed to be shifting gears or switching gears. I wasn't getting the hint, so it kept getting louder and louder until I finally made that jump. And I discovered the work of Dolores Cannon, who is a lady. She's like an author. She has like, I don't know, probably like 20 books out. And she was actually using hypnosis for PTSD, and then stumbled upon past lives. And then it kind of evolved into this whole like healing modality because people started getting healed from processing past life trauma. And I wasn't so interested in that, but I was just kind of like drawn to this, and ended up finding a lady like not too far away that ended up learning her modality or what she taught, and went and had my own experience. And in that one session, I immediately stopped having seizures. In 2 months, I was off all 14 medications. As a side effect, I lost like 60 pounds in 2 months just from stuff my mind was hanging on to. And then started sleeping every night, like had this mental clarity that like I never had before. And then that's where I found out I was supposed to be doing this work, and I was like, that can't be right. There's no way. Like I couldn't picture myself doing this because I was so attached to this old idea of who I was. And so I had a really hard time with that part of it. And I pretty much had to kind of get dragged into doing this. But after having my own results and having my own experience and like not being able to get there any other way, I was like, I knew without a doubt, like this is what I was supposed to be doing. This is that next step. And then also looking at the path and realizing like I needed to have that background so I can be that bridge for other people now. Because what I've learned through this work is like it doesn't need to detract from anything we know medically, scientifically. It just adds another lens, another layer to it, and people can really get some profound results that you're not going to get any other way. So I get to give that gift to other people, and it's just such a beautiful thing. The physical aspect is one part of it, but like I'm in the best spot of my life. Like you can't even put that into words. I don't know how to like even talk about that because it's like so abstract, but like I feel better than I did 15 years ago. Like so.
Yeah. Wow, that's incredible. What an amazing story. I mean, did you say in 2 weeks you were off like all 14 medications?
It was 2 months. I was off most of them in 2 weeks. Though there was one that I just kind of like the one that I was taking for seizures. I kind of like weaned off of because coming off too fast like can induce seizures. And like the last one I had was like over an hour long on the maximum amount of medication. So I was just like really scared about that part. And then after a while, it's just like, okay, I'm fine. Like, and it's been 6 years now. So
Wow,
total
that's
game changer.
incredible. Okay. So, what is quantum healing? Like, how do you describe it when someone's like, "What do you do?" How would you describe what happens?
Someone actually asked me that the other day, and I was like, I don't know. I do stuff with people, like, because it doesn't really fit into a box anymore. But in the simplest explanation, I basically work in a deep state of trance with people where their conscious mind kind of steps aside, and we can figure out what's going on behind the scenes to kind of shift them into the version that they want to experience. And usually like certain things are keeping us stuck in a certain reality or a certain experience. Maybe it's like the fear around stuff, maybe it's what happened in the past, and we can process all that when their conscious mind is kind of out of the way and we're kind of at that programming level where we can really switch between things and change between things. So I see the quantum aspect of it as like the field of possibilities, and like all those possibilities exist, and basically I help free people up so they can experience what they want in this life. So
Yeah. Yeah, that's a beautiful way to say it. So I had a healing session, a quantum healing session with Matt about was been about a month or so, right?
yeah,
And that was my experience of it too. It's just like it was so transformational and so powerful, and yet also so hard to explain what happens. But for me, like what I could really see is when we get what we think we know out of the way, right? It's like when we go into this experience of like, you do you call it hypnosis? I guess it's like a hypnosis
yeah, and
experience.
I kind of I don't use that word because people have a lot of fear around that. It is, but like when I stopped using the word, no one has a problem and everyone can do it. So I just tell them, well, it's just like a meditative state, and you actually just go through these different states all the time. And then give them a little demo, and they're like, "Oh yeah, I can do that," and then everyone can do it. So, but yeah, you're in this like trance state, like in this kind of like relaxed state, like you'd be in a meditation or in a dream, or
Yeah, like super relaxed, but present, and it just felt like it was kind of like getting the ego self out of the way, right? Or the part of you that thinks it knows everything about everything, thinks it knows the answers, or that logical part was just kind of, that's my experience anyway. Is it just kind of like, it's not like it went away, like it wasn't there. It just moved it aside so that the other possibilities could occur, or like deeper insight could occur. And I feel like that was really powerful. And then this tapping into my higher self. So, our listeners who listen to the podcast regularly know that, like, I'm a big advocate for really trusting your intuition, taking direction from your higher self, and learning how to actively access that part of you. And so, I think that's why I was so drawn to the work you do, because it's like exactly that, right? Another layer of accessing your higher self. And I felt like the insights that I received were super profound and like unexpected. And as you know, as you and I were talking before we hit the record button, the insights keep coming, right? It's not like it happens in that moment. It's kind of, for me, is like what happens after.
yeah, and I've even found that for myself. I listened back to my first session like 6 months after it happened, and I talked about stuff that happened 4 months after the session, not even knowing what I was talking about, and it didn't even make sense at the time. But there was so much information in there. And what I love about the process is like so many people are searching for the next thing to fix them, or the next, like, whether it's holistic, whether it's like a new like medication, they're like keep seeking these things outside of themselves. And like what I love about this process is I'm not really doing anything. Like as much as I love to take credit for like some of this stuff, like all I can do is show the person the door, but like it's them walking through it. It's their self discovery. It's them getting that trust in themselves, their trust in their higher selves. So many people have like no confidence. They have like they have like all this self doubt that blocks that communication. We can say, "Oh yeah, listen to your higher self." Well, if everyone could just do that, we wouldn't be having this conversation right now. So you leave, I think, with a better connection to that, and then it just doesn't go away. You know, you can trust it easier, you can follow it easier. You don't have to worry about as much because you're constantly being led, you're constantly being guided, and then all these other things kind of like fade away as you continue to proceed, like after the session.
Yeah, I think that's why it's so empowering, right? Because it's not just like you showed up somewhere and like you got healed and that's it. And it's like not something outside of yourself, but it's like a part of yourself. You are leading yourself through this process. And so I found it to be very empowering, very insightful. And yeah, you touched on something like I feel people are seeking healing in a lot of ways, and healing is a buzzword now, right? I mean, everyone's healing and everyone's working on something, and that's a good thing. I mean, ultimately, that is a really good thing. And I also see that for people who are really drawn to this journey of personal growth or the spiritual path, is like it can almost become like an addiction. I'm curious your thoughts about this, where yeah, like we're always healing something, right? And forgetting that like we could just enjoy the moment that's now, or just be present in the moments at now. Do you see that or experience that as
I
well?
was guilty of that too. I was like, "Oh, I'm doing a good thing, right? I'm like going to this thing and going to this thing." And then I heard like from my higher self, "That's because you still don't feel like you're good enough yet." And I'm like, "Oh, dang it." So it's still like trying to fill this void. I'm like, it was just repackaged, but it was the same thing. And um, yeah, but I see that a lot with um, just with everything, even going to some of these like um, wellness fairs, stuff like that. Like people are doing the exact same thing, but like that's what I love about kind of this approach versus like other things I've even experienced is like it's all you. like like I'm showing you the door, I'm guiding you through the process, but like I don't want you to need me. Like that's that's the whole point is to get you on your own and then and let the next person in. And once people realize that, once they realize like how powerful they are and that they do have this within them, their whole world changes. You can't like it's hard to unring the bell after you go through something like this.
Right.
And,
Yeah, like you can't unring the bell. You can't unsee what you have just walked through. I'm super curious, being in and I love what you said in the beginning. It's like you can see the journey of being a research scientist and how it really supports what you're doing now, right? Because you can help people cross that bridge. But I'm curious, like for you, because a lot of people that are listening to this podcast are like sort of on the journey, right? Of stepping into their yes life. What was it like for you when you're like, yeah, I'm going to leave my job as a research scientist and I'm going to become a quantum healer? Like how how was that process? Were your friends and family like, what are you talking about? Like
oh yeah, it was a long process. Like I kept trying to do things the old way and nothing was working out. So like I didn't have to like leave a job there per se, like, but I was doing like research stuff. So I was working on like a cancer research center at one of the local colleges, and like 3 years setting this up, and like right before we launched it, we lost like $15 million in funding, and like the building's sitting empty, and I'm like, what am I doing wrong? I put all this into it, and like nothing, everything kept like failing, like in my mind, and um, yeah, shifting away from that, and then I had a job working at a school then, and that was kind of like my transition period of like figuring some of this stuff out, kind of throwing in the towel. I thought it was giving up, but people call it surrendering. But in my mind, I was like, just giving up. And then I just started like opening up and questioning things and like finding like what I don't know, finding all these answers to things that I never like really addressed. And I don't know, that just opened up so many doors. And I think a big thing was just taking a step back and realizing, like, hey, maybe you don't know everything, and just start questioning. But even in that, then, even though I wasn't actively in that anymore, um, people still expected me to be a certain way, and like even you're throwing away 5 degrees to go do this, like doesn't make a lot of sense. And like even in my other position, I got offered a job for more than double my salary before I started doing this, and I knew I had to turn it down because I wasn't going to be happy there. And I actually liked my other job. It just was the time was up, and it was time for me to like move on to something else. So there's a lot of fear. There's a lot of like talk about living your yes life. I'm not gonna lie. There's like, what are people gonna think? Because I'm this, and like we have this old identity of like who we are. Even putting it out there, I'm like, what is my family gonna think when I say I'm doing this woo woo stuff, and someone who is like very I don't know so rigid in the way of thinking, and now he's doing this like it's like complete 180. So
like what's going
I
on with
was worried
Matt?
about like yeah the judgments of other people, what other people might think, and it's interesting because it's all in our head. It's like when I did my first session, I found out that I was hung up on it was my perception of other people's perceptions that was keeping me stuck. I'm like, what I think someone may be thinking. I'm like, that's not even a real thing. Like that's it's just this made up thing in our head. And then the more I tapped into just my true self, like what I wanted, I don't know, kind of following my heart more than following my head, then everything just started to unfold. And it wasn't this, the world didn't fall apart. It wasn't this big ordeal like I thought. Of course, certain people kind of followed my life that just didn't match anymore, but it wasn't the end of the world like I thought it was going to be. And then everything started getting easier. Like, I didn't know this was an option. Like, how is this working? It was blowing my mind because I was working like 1/10 as hard as I used to, even when I still had my old job, and everything was happening. And I'm like, what? Like, how is this even possible? So I think it was just little steps of being like eye openers and getting past like that fear of just jumping. So
Yeah, it's like the courage to take the leap, right? And I always say, I mean, you just demonstrated so beautifully what I talk about a lot, which is, that is the way your higher self leads. It's like dropping all these breadcrumbs. And if you're not, picking up the breadcrumbs, sometimes it like will drop a boulder or, something a little bit bigger to get your attention, like you were saying. And, what I'm hearing in this is you eventually found the courage to just take the leap. And from that point, it got easier. I think the hardest part sometimes is taking the leap away from logic because it often doesn't make sense. It's not, it just doesn't. It doesn't make sense on paper sometimes, not always, but often when our higher self is guiding us, because it's a different type of guidance, right? It really is from the heart. It's like our mind can only look to the past, it can only look to what other people are doing, and so I think that our heart has access to this deeper wisdom or higher self. And I feel like I see a lot of times that is where people get stuck. It's like they know, they can feel it, they feel the tug on their heart, and it's the courage to take that leap. So this is a beautiful story to show people like actually just the leap is the hardest part. Not going to say it's like everything is rainbows and daisies. Like we both know that's not, not everything, but life could get easier. You start to flow, you start to realize that, oh, when I'm actually following my path, like there's so much joy available.
and one thing I often tell people, I'm like, if you know your path, that's not it. Because you talked about these breadcrumbs, like no one could tell you what you're going to be doing now. Like if someone told you 10 years ago that you were going to be doing this now and having this conversation, you probably wouldn't believe them. But it's following each of those pieces. And like, if you don't know what those pieces are, start finding the things that bring you a little bit more joy than the other option. And you just keep following those and following your heart. For me, it was like getting out of my head. The old me used to be like, well, let's weigh the pros and cons of this. And according to my calculations, like this should be a viable option. And now I'm like, oh, I feel like I should do this. And like complete 180, but like it works out so much better. And you can put that energy into something else. You can, if you're just, I don't know, kind of following those breadcrumbs and just feeding that rather than being all like spread out. It's not as exhausting. It's like you can either swim upstream or you can use that energy to float downstream and just move around stuff. So
Right. Okay, this is good. I have a question for you. So would you say like if someone's listening to this and they're feeling like exhausted or they feel like, "Oh my gosh, every day I'm swimming upstream." What would your advice to them be?
do something different. Your body's screaming at you. And it may be hard to see because like you don't have the energy, but start trying. It can just be little things at first. It's don't look for these big changes right away. Start small. Start following those things that bring you a little bit more joy, that kind of fill your bucket. For me, it was to start saying no. I was like one of those yes people. I would help everyone, and like there's nothing wrong with that, but when you're doing it at the expense of yourself, like I'd even help people that didn't want help just because that's the way I got like validation and that's the way I felt good about myself. But like I was bottom on that list. So start doing things for yourself. Start saying yes to you. And then when you start doing that, then that kind of builds, that kind of grows, and then you start becoming aware of where your energy is going. I see energy like currency. How are you spending it? Yeah, and really, at the end of the day, I can help so many more people because I take care of myself first, and I am not depleted at the end of the day either.
Amen. Yes. Yeah, that is so that is like so important. At the end of the day, you're not depleted, right? That's how you know. It's like we have to have boundaries around our own self-care or on taking care of ourselves in whatever way that means, right? And I have you do you feel like it shifts and changes for you in different seasons, like the way that you take care of yourself or what your energy requirements are?
Oh, sure, Sure, and I've gotten better at listening to what that need is. Um, I still find myself getting pulled back and be like, "Okay, out of balance again," and I just it's that no one stays in one state or the other. You can feel yourself kind of flow between these things, but once you learn how to listen to what your body needs and you you give it what it needs, then you don't get caught in these things or you don't stay there at least. So,
For sure. How would you suggest that people begin tapping into their intuition? Like if someone feels like I'm not really sure if I'm intuitive or I'm not really sure if I'm getting it right, what would you suggest for helping them tap in?
um, well, everyone's had these experiences where you're like, "Oh my gosh, I shouldn't have second guessed myself. Like that totally didn't work out. Shouldn't change my answer on that test. Oh, I knew better, but I still did this." We've all had those experiences. So it's remembering those, and then it's not putting so much emphasis on what someone else says. It's finding what's true for you. I even tell people when I talk, I'm like, don't listen to me just because I said it. Like, I don't know either. This is what I know today, and by tomorrow it'll probably change. So you have to find out what's true for you, what's right for you, and no one can tell you what that is. So it's starting to find your own truth, and then finding your way of getting your intuitive sense. So everyone kind of gets this differently, and I know I struggled. I made it harder than I needed to in the beginning, probably purposefully, but like finding your way. And I would compare myself to others and like, oh, they're getting this way, and like it was so frustrating to me, and like, how come this isn't working for me? And I was like, I was making it harder than it needed to be. um I finding your like quiet space, I encourage you to like find like a space that you can get this information. So if I go and try to meditate and try to get answers, like it doesn't come to me like that easy. If if I go in the shower, boom, 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 it's like everything just comes to me. And that's like always been my spot without even knowing it. And I'm like, oh wait, I'm already doing this. Like if I go sit in a cave and meditate for 2 years, that's like that's not my place. But like the shower, it's like I close the door, I have that quiet space, it's just me, and like that's when it's on. If you struggle with this, put out the intention before you go to bed. Keep a notebook by the bed, or even just ask for what you want. I encourage people that really struggle with this, make a list of stuff you want to know. The biggest thing, people don't ask for what they want. You're not going to get an answer if you don't have a question. Like, so, so just ask. It really can be that simple. And if you struggle with the listening part, write a list of questions, set them aside for 3 weeks, and go back to them. You'd be surprised at how much you figure out. As you know from the process I take people through, I have them prepare a list of stuff they want to know, some questions they want to address. You know how many times I get a person with 5 revisions of their questions because they figured it out every time they write something, and a day later they just know all the answers. Like, like I didn't even know I could do this. I'm like, yeah, you can, just because you've never asked. Like,
Absolutely. Yeah, I think that was something that you said to me too. I don't even remember the context of it. But you're like, well, the process already starts to work as soon as you set the intention, right? As soon as you book the session or you set the intention that you're going to come and have this healing session, it's already like the process is already beginning. Can you explain a little bit about that?
well, considering that like time's not linear, like it's already known what we're going to cover. So just the intention of wanting to heal can really, it's basically the asking of the intention of wanting stuff to heal. That can be all it takes sometimes. I'll have people, I've had people call me up and they'll tell me, they'll schedule an appointment and they call me back like the next day and they tell me their symptoms that they had for 10 years went away after they hung up. And I'm like, in my mind, we didn't do anything yet, but it's already known like what we're going to cover. The session that we do is almost like a formality, and um, it's I don't know, it's been happening from the time that you committed to it to the even like like you just said, it's happening even still as these things kind of unpack, as like new things present themselves, and so like it just keeps going too.
What are some of the things that people book sessions with you for? Like what are some common maybe, things that people want to heal or that they want to work on in a session with you?
A lot of stuff around career, relationships, around um, I don't want to say mental illness, but like mental conditions like depression, anxiety, PTSD. This is real effective at processing those traumas. And like, nice thing is you don't have to wait till you get sick to get better. So like literally you could show up with nothing and it'd still be a full day because um, because your soul, your subconscious mind will present you with certain things that need to be processed, need to be addressed, and like a lot of times that that part of you knows better than either of us know. So another common one, what's my purpose? That's, what should I do? How does that look at this point in my life? A lot of the physical healing, which we talked about, that's one aspect of it. But like really, when we get into it, everything is so woven together. You can't even separate the questions out because, like, I don't know, they all tie together.
Yeah, absolutely. You mentioned, we could still spend a whole day together. So I want to talk about that because I know when I booked the session with you, you're like, oh, an average session is 4 to 6 hours. And I was like, 4 to 6 hours, like what? And now having gone through it, I'm like, oh, I totally get it. And really that time goes by so fast. I mean, you need that length of time to really go as deep as it goes. And I feel like it kind of seemed like you were just following a thread, right? It's just like you were kind of asking the questions. So you were sort of following this thread that, I don't know, my higher self, our higher selves working together, knew exactly where to go. But the time went by so quickly. It was crazy.
Yeah. And I hear that a lot. People get done. I'm like, well, how long do you think that was? And they're like, the lady yesterday was like, oh, about 30, 35 minutes. I'm like, yeah, it's been over 3 hours. Like, so like your sense of time in that space is so skewed. It's so different because I don't know, like even in that dream space, like you can't measure time really. So I don't know, it just goes by so fast. And that's kind of the exciting part of this too, is like I never know where it's gonna lead. It's like talk about our higher selves meeting. I'm like, have your people talk to my people, and then we just kind of follow it together. It's like it's kind of like walking through the fog and just like you can only see 2 feet in front of you, but things have a way of revealing themselves. And then at the end it all comes together. Like I don't know. That's probably my favorite part. All these disconnected pieces come together in this nice little package with a bow on it, and it's like one of those complicated movies of how things all like weave into each other. And that's why I've learned not to like short changes or like try to rush it because like you miss out on so much. It'd be like someone opening up for you for surgery and only doing one thing, even though five things needed to be done. Well, what's the point of that?
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah, energy work is so interesting and it's hard to describe because it really is deep work, and I think yeah, it's like that time just seems to sort of suspend itself, but it's not. I mean, there was no point that it felt, I don't know, like it it felt like I was present, and I know that I was present for all of it. It didn't feel like I was like floating in space and this far off. It wasn't like that at all. It was actually, it just felt very safe and secure. And from the next step to the next step to the next step, where like we said, that time went by really fast. The next day, I was really tired after because I know I was doing a lot of just like energetic work, right? Like I think I had like you don't need to understand how energy works to get so much from an experience like this.
That's what I love about it too, is like it doesn't matter what like all walks of life, it doesn't matter where you came from, what you were doing before this, like and or what your beliefs are. Some people worry about that. I'm like, I've worked with nuns and atheists and they all tap into the same thing. They all get the answers they need. And like it doesn't matter. Like all rivers lead to the ocean. It doesn't matter how we get there. So what that's I love that part of it because there's so many more similarities and differences. Everyone's kind of telling me the same thing about how things work, and like either everyone's making it up or there's like some like thread of truth here. And when people can kind of find that for themselves, like yeah, profound things. So
Mhm. Yeah. Well, I'm super grateful that you chose to follow your higher self and step into this work. And I really wanted to just share your message and that this is a healing modality that, maybe a lot of people don't know about. And I think, whether someone's listening and they're like, well, I've tried it all and like, I don't know what else to do. This is a great next step, but this could also be a great first step, right? If you're just starting out on the healing journey and you want to really tap into your higher self, I feel like you could probably save people a lot of time.
yeah. And for me this felt like 10 years of therapy in one day for me. Like I was going to see like I was going to talk therapy and stuff like that, and like I got to the point where I felt like I know all the right answers and I don't feel any better. Like we just kept going over the same stuff, and like um with this, we kind of get to the point at where those things are created, we actually change them. So you can know this stuff on an analytical or conscious level, but how do you change it? Some people are like, oh, just let it go, just do this. Well, if it was that easy, like people would just be doing it. In this process, we get to the space where that kind of was created, and then from that space, yes, then you can move out of it, then you can let it go, then you can process it. But like, how do you get back to that? All this stuff is like noodling around your subconscious, and like maybe your life is great in front of you, but you still feel like crap. Well, why is that? Okay, it's because all these things on repeat. I'm not good enough. Oh, I don't deserve this. Oh, like, oh, that can even be like your parents' beliefs that you've taken on, like stuff that's not even true, and all that stuff is running in the background. So in this, we're at that level where we can just go through and delete, delete, delete. Oh, that's not even mine. Yep, don't delete, and and then you can start living the life that you want to experience or that you can experience. So
Yeah,
pretty
absolutely.
powerful.
That's very powerful. I'm curious what your next evolution of yes looks like for you. So you're already living your yes life. What's next? What are you stepping into, or where is your higher self calling you or leading you now?
It's leading me to doing more retreats, stuff like that, reaching more people. I'm connecting and like with more people in Western medicine. So like, I have some like a couple ways to get in different places, and just like people that have been brought into my life like with integrative medicine and stuff. So like this networking of stuff, which I've been doing on an invisible level, but now it's like like, hey, I got a guy for that, or like, hey, I know someone, because I've met so many people, and now it's kind of like taking that to the next level. So that's really cool, because when you bridge these worlds together, like, man, then we can really take off. Because I may not be what someone needs, but if I can connect them with someone that would be suitable for them, or like the something that would get to what they want to cover easier, more effectively, I can do that. So that's been pretty rewarding, because I think that's where things are heading, and everyone's kind of feeling this too. Like you see this, like the people you've connected with, and even this conversation right here, like all that, I don't know, it's like has a synergistic effect where like 1 + 1 = 5. Like the days of like the individual healer and stuff, those are over. Like this competitive mindset, like that's like a thing of the past. Like the way I see it is this cooperation, coordination, like network of people, and then we're gonna start seeing some amazing things. So
Absolutely. Really cool. Well, thank you. Where can people find you if they want to learn more about what you do or connect with you? What's the best place for them to connect?
Um, I'm on like social media. I'm on Instagram, on Matt Schmidt QH, on most things. YouTube. A lot of people find me on YouTube. I actually have a lot of these free processes on YouTube, and just because it's not in person, doesn't mean it's not powerful. I had a lady contact me the other day, and her brain tumor went away in 3 weeks just going through the videos I have out there. So you don't really need me to do this. Probably not the best marketing, but I want everyone to be able to have access to this. So all my classes, all my workshops, everything's free on YouTube. Matt Schmidt QH is the handle for my channel, and yeah, some pretty amazing things there. So I also have my website, mattschmidtqh.com, and yeah, pretty accessible most places.
Well, thank you for sharing with us today. You guys go and find Matt online, watch some of his videos. If you feel called, book a session. It's incredible. And I just want to say thank you for just coming and sharing what you do with all of us, and also inspiring us as someone who has truly said yes to your soul and followed it. And it led you to this amazing place. So super grateful for you.
Thanks, Lisa. I appreciate being on here and being able to share this. So we're just getting started.
That's right. That's right. Guys, it's not even the limit, right? Thanks, Matt.
Thank you.